Marcus Washington felt the pain start during his lunch break. He was sitting in the teacher's lounge at Lincoln High School, eating the sandwich his wife Angela had packed for him that morning. The pain began as a dull ache in his chest right in the center. At first he thought it was just heartburn. He had eaten too quickly, rushing between classes like he always did. But this pain was different. It grew stronger with each passing minute. Marcus pressed his hand against his chest and tried to take deep breaths. The air felt thick, like he was breathing through a wet towel. His colleague, Mrs. Patterson, noticed him sweating and asked if he was okay. Marcus nodded, but he was not okay. Not at all. By the time the final bell rang at 3 o'clock, Marcus knew something was seriously wrong. His chest felt like someone was sitting on it. His left arm tingled with a strange numbness. He had seen enough medical shows on television to know these were warning signs. His father had died of a heart attack at 55. Marcus was 52 now. He called Angela from his classroom. His voice shook as he told her about the pain. Angela did not hesitate. She told him to drive straight to Metropolitan General Hospital. She would meet him there. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to say he would just go home and rest, but the fear in his wife's voice made him listen. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every red light seemed to last forever. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tight, focusing on the road ahead. The pain in his chest came in waves now, sharp and burning. He pulled into the emergency department parking lot at 4:30 in the afternoon. The emergency room was busy. People filled every chair in the waiting area. A woman held a crying baby. An elderly man coughed into a tissue. 2 teenagers sat with their mother, one of them holding an ice pack to his head. Marcus walked to the check-in desk, one hand still pressed against his chest. The woman at the desk barely looked up. She asked for his insurance card and identification. Marcus fumbled with his wallet, his hands shaking. He told her he was having chest pain and could not breathe well. She nodded and typed something into her computer. She handed him a clipboard with forms to fill out and told him to take a seat. Marcus found an empty chair near the back of the waiting room. He filled out the forms as quickly as he could, checking boxes and writing his medical history. Family history of heart disease, high blood pressure controlled with medication, no smoking. He tried to focus on the questions, but the pain kept pulling his attention away. Angela arrived 20 minutes later. She rushed through the automatic doors, her purse swinging from her shoulder, her face tight with worry. She spotted Marcus and hurried to his side. She took his hand and squeezed it. Her hand felt cool against his clammy palm. They waited and waited. Marcus watched other patients get called back. A young woman with a sprained ankle, a man with a deep cut on his hand, a child with a fever. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. Marcus stood up twice to ask the desk staff about the wait time. Both times they told him it would not be much longer. Angela noticed something that made her stomach turn. 3 people who had arrived after Marcus had already been called back. 2 of them were white. One of them was an older white man who had been coughing, but he did not seem to be in severe pain. Yet he was taken back before Marcus. By 6 o'clock, Marcus was slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow. The pain had spread to his jaw now. Sweat dripped down his temples. Angela marched to the desk, her voice firm but controlled. She explained that her husband had been waiting for over an hour and a half with chest pain. The receptionist sighed and said they were doing their best, that patients were seen based on the severity of their condition. Angela wanted to scream. What could be more severe than chest pain? But she held her tongue. She returned to Marcus and held his hand again, whispering that it would be okay, that they would see him soon. Finally, at 6:20, a nurse called Marcus's name. Angela helped him stand. They followed the nurse through the double doors into the treatment area. The nurse took Marcus's vital signs. His blood pressure was high. His heart rate was racing. She asked him to describe his symptoms. Marcus explained everything. The chest pain that had started at lunch. The trouble breathing. The numbness in his arm. The nurse nodded and wrote notes on her computer. She told them a doctor would be in soon. They were moved to a small room with a bed, a monitor, and 1 chair. Marcus sat on the bed while Angela took the chair. Another 30 minutes passed before a doctor appeared. She was a young black woman in a white coat, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag read Dr. Keisha Johnson. Resident Dr. Johnson smiled at them, but her eyes were serious. She asked Marcus to tell her everything again. She listened carefully, nodding as he spoke. She did not interrupt. She did not look at her phone or seem rushed. When Marcus finished, she examined him, placing her stethoscope on his chest and back, checking his pulse, looking into his eyes with a small light. She told Marcus that his symptoms concerned her. Chest pain with shortness of breath and arm numbness could indicate a heart problem. She wanted to run tests right away. Blood work to check for heart enzyme levels, an electrocardiogram to check his heart rhythm, possibly a chest x-ray. Angela felt relief wash over her. Finally, someone was taking this seriously. Marcus nodded, too tired to do much else. Dr. Johnson put a hand on his shoulder and told him they would figure out what was wrong. She would make sure he got the care he needed. Within minutes, nurses came in to draw blood. They attached electrodes to Marcus's chest for the EKG. The machine beeped and printed out a long strip of paper showing his heart's electrical activity. Dr. Johnson studied it carefully. Her brow furrowed. She stepped out and returned a few minutes later. The test showed something was not right. Marcus's heart enzyme levels were elevated. The EKG showed irregularities in his heart rhythm. Dr. Johnson explained that these signs suggested his heart was under stress. She wanted to admit him overnight for observation and more testing. In the morning, the cardiology team would see him during their rounds. Marcus felt fear creep up his spine. Admitted to the hospital. That meant this was serious. Angela squeezed his hand tighter. She asked Dr. Johnson what they should expect. The young doctor explained that they would monitor him closely through the night. They would give him medication to help his heart and manage the pain. The cardiology specialists would determine the next steps in the morning. By 8 o'clock that evening, Marcus was settled in a hospital room on the cardiac floor. The room was small but clean. A window looked out over the parking lot. The bed was narrow but comfortable enough. Angela pulled the chair close to his bedside and refused to leave. A nurse came in every few hours to check his vital signs. They gave him medication through an IV in his arm. The pain in his chest eased a little, but it did not go away completely. Marcus tried to sleep, but worry kept him awake. Angela dozed in the chair, waking every time a nurse entered. As the night wore on, Marcus stared at the ceiling tiles and thought about his students. Tomorrow was Friday. He had planned to give them a quiz on the civil rights movement. Someone else would have to cover his classes. He thought about his father, who had not made it to the hospital in time. He thought about his own mortality. Angela woke around midnight and saw Marcus staring at nothing. She moved to sit on the edge of his bed, careful not to disturb the wires and tubes. She told him everything would be okay. The doctors would fix whatever was wrong. He would be back in his classroom next week teaching history and inspiring kids like he always did. Marcus wanted to believe her. He held her hand and finally closed his eyes. Tomorrow the cardiology team would come. Tomorrow they would have answers. He just needed to make it through the night. He had no idea that tomorrow would bring a different kind of pain, one that had nothing to do with his heart and everything to do with the color of his skin. Morning came too quickly for Marcus. He had barely slept. Every time he drifted off, a machine would beep or a nurse would come in to check on him. Angela had finally fallen into a deeper sleep around 4 in the morning, her head resting uncomfortably on the edge of his bed. Marcus did not wake her. She needed the rest. The sun was just starting to rise when a nurse came in with breakfast. Oatmeal, orange juice, and toast. Hospital food. Marcus was not very hungry, but he ate a few bites to keep his strength up. His chest still ached, a constant reminder that something inside him was not working right. Angela woke up and stretched, her neck stiff from sleeping in such an awkward position. She checked her phone. It was 7 in the morning. She asked Marcus how he felt. He told her the truth, scared, tired, in pain. She kissed his forehead and told him the doctors would be in soon. Dr. Keisha Johnson stopped by around 7:30. She looked tired too, probably from working all night. She checked Marcus's chart and asked him a few questions. How was the pain? Any new symptoms? Marcus told her the pain was still there, but maybe a little better than yesterday. Dr. Johnson nodded and made notes. She told them that the attending cardiologist would be making rounds soon with the medical team. Dr. Richard Brennan was one of the best in the hospital, she said, though her voice sounded a bit flat when she said his name. By 8:30, Marcus could hear voices in the hallway. A group of people was moving from room to room. The medical team. Angela stood up and smoothed down her shirt. She wanted to make a good impression. Marcus adjusted his hospital gown and tried to sit up straighter in bed. The door opened and several people filed in. There were 5 of them. 2 medical students who looked barely old enough to be out of college. 2 residents, including Dr. Johnson, and at the front a tall white man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. He wore an expensive-looking suit under his white coat. His name tag read Dr. Richard Brennan, attending physician, cardiology. Dr. Brennan did not look at Marcus right away. He picked up the chart from the end of the bed and flipped through it quickly. His eyes scanned the pages, but his face showed no emotion. The other members of the team stood behind him, quiet and attentive. Finally, Dr. Brennan looked up. His eyes passed over Marcus briefly, then moved to Angela, then back to the chart. He did not introduce himself. He did not smile. He simply started talking, addressing his comments to the residents rather than to Marcus. "This is a 52-year-old male presenting with chest pain," Dr. Brennan said, his voice flat and professional. "Admitted last night by Dr. Johnson." He glanced at Dr. Johnson with an expression that Marcus could not quite read. It was not friendly. Dr. Johnson stepped forward slightly. "Yes, sir. The patient presented with classic cardiac symptoms. Chest pain radiating to the left arm, shortness of breath, elevated troponin levels, and EKG abnormalities showing." Dr. Brennan held up his hand, cutting her off. "I can read the chart, doctor." His tone was sharp. Dr. Johnson stepped back, her jaw tight. Dr. Brennan finally turned to Marcus. His gaze was cold, assessing. "Mr. Washington, is it?" He did not wait for Marcus to respond. "Tell me about this chest pain. When did it start?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Yesterday afternoon around noon. It started as a dull ache but got worse. By the time I got here, I could barely breathe. My arm was numb too." Dr. Brennan nodded slowly. "And what do you do for work?" "I'm a teacher. High school history." "I see." Dr. Brennan made a note on his tablet. "Do you use any recreational drugs, Mr. Washington?" "Cocaine, methamphetamine?" Marcus blinked, stunned. "What?" No, I don't use drugs." Angela's mouth fell open. She looked at Dr. Brennan, then at the other doctors. No one else seemed surprised by the question. Dr. Brennan continued, his voice still neutral. "Are you sure? Because chest pain in younger patients is often related to stimulant use. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We need to know the truth to treat you properly." Marcus felt heat rise to his face. "I told you I don't use drugs. I've never used drugs. I don't even drink alcohol." Dr. Brennan raised an eyebrow. Well, chest pain can also be caused by anxiety. Panic attacks often mimic heart attack symptoms. Have you been under stress lately?" Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. "I teach high school. Of course I'm under stress. But this isn't anxiety. This is real pain. My father died of a heart attack. This feels like what he described." Dr. Brennan waved his hand dismissively. "Family history is noted. But we can't jump to conclusions." He looked at the EKG printout that Dr. Johnson had attached to the chart. He studied it for maybe 5 seconds. These irregularities could be normal variants. The troponin elevation is minimal. Dr. Johnson spoke up again, her voice careful but firm. "Sir, with respect, the troponin levels were elevated beyond normal range and the EKG shows clear ST segment changes that—" "Dr. Johnson," Dr. Brennan interrupted, turning to face her. "How long have you been a resident?" 6 months, sir." 6 months. He nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. "I've been practicing cardiology for 30 years. I think I can interpret an EKG." He turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Washington, I'm going to reduce your pain medication. You're on a fairly high dose, and I don't think it's necessary." Angela could not stay quiet anymore. "Wait, you're reducing his pain medicine?" "He's in pain, real pain." "Why would you do that?" Dr. Brennan looked at her as if noticing her for the first time. "Mrs. Washington, I understand you're concerned, but over-medicating patients does more harm than good. Your husband's symptoms are likely not cardiac in nature. They could be muscular, anxiety-related, or even gastrointestinal. We need to be careful about creating dependency on pain medications." "Dependency?" Angela's voice rose. "He's been here less than 24 hours. He's having a medical emergency, and you're worried about dependency? Mrs. Washington, please calm down." Dr. Brennan's voice had taken on a patronizing tone. "I understand this is emotional for you, but we need to approach this rationally. Your husband is not dying. His vital signs have stabilized. The symptoms he's describing are vague and could have multiple explanations. Marcus felt something break inside him. He had felt this before. The subtle dismissal, the assumption, the way white people in authority sometimes looked at him like he was trying to get away with something. He had felt it when a police officer pulled him over for driving suspiciously in his own neighborhood. He had felt it when a store clerk followed him through the aisles. And now he was feeling it here in a hospital bed with his life potentially on the line. "Doctor," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest, "I'm not making this up. I'm not seeking drugs. I'm a high school teacher with good insurance. I have a master's degree. I coach the debate team. I've never been arrested. I don't fit whatever profile you seem to think I fit." Dr. Brennan's expression hardened. "I don't appreciate what you're implying, Mr. Washington. I treat all my patients the same, regardless of their background. I'm simply saying that based on the evidence in front of me, your condition does not appear to be an acute cardiac event. The hospital is very busy. We have limited beds. I need to reserve them for genuinely critical patients. Are you saying my husband isn't critical?" Angela asked, her voice shaking now with both fear and rage. "I'm saying that we've monitored him overnight. His condition has not worsened, and the tests do not definitively show acute coronary syndrome. I believe he can be discharged today with follow-up care." Dr. Johnson looked like she wanted to say something but was struggling with whether she should. The other residents and medical students stared at the floor. No one challenged Dr. Brennan. Dr. Brennan made a few more notes on his tablet. "I'm ordering discharge for this afternoon. We'll send you home with a prescription for basic anti-inflammatories. Follow up with your primary care physician within a week. If symptoms worsen significantly, you can return to the emergency department." He turned to leave, and the rest of the medical team began to file out behind him. Dr. Johnson was the last to leave. She glanced back at Marcus and Angela, and in her eyes Marcus saw something. Sympathy, apology, maybe even shame. When the door closed, Angela sat down heavily in the chair. She put her face in her hands. "What just happened?" she whispered. Marcus knew exactly what had happened. He had just been dismissed by a doctor who had decided, within minutes of meeting him, that his pain was not real. That he was probably a drug user or an anxious black man making a fuss over nothing. A doctor who could not see past his own prejudices to see a patient who needed help. His chest hurt worse now. Not just from the physical pain, but from the humiliation, from the fear that he might actually be dying, and no one with the power to help him believed it. Angela looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "We're not letting them discharge you. Something is wrong." "I know it is. We're going to fight this." Marcus nodded, but he felt exhausted. How do you fight a system that has already decided you're not worth saving? How do you convince someone to see your humanity when they've already made up their mind? Outside the room, Dr. Brennan was already moving on to the next patient, his team trailing behind him. In his mind, the case was closed. Just another patient with vague symptoms, probably nothing serious. He had more important cases to deal with, but Marcus Washington was not nothing. After the medical team left, Marcus and Angela sat in silence for several minutes. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on them like a heavy blanket. Marcus stared at the wall, his mind replaying Dr. Brennan's words. Anxiety, drug use, not a genuinely critical patient. Each phrase felt like a slap. Angela pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. Marcus watched her, curious but too tired to ask what she was doing. After a few minutes, she looked up. "I'm finding out how to file a complaint, and I'm calling a patient advocate. This isn't right, Marcus. None of this is right." Before Marcus could respond, the door opened. Dr. Keisha Johnson slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. She looked around as if checking to make sure no one had followed her. Her face was troubled. "I only have a minute," she said, her voice low. "I'm not supposed to be here, but I couldn't leave without saying something." She moved closer to the bed. "Mr. and Mrs. Washington, I want you to know that I disagree with Dr. Brennan's assessment. Your test results concern me. The EKG changes are not normal variants, no matter what he says. The elevated troponin levels indicate cardiac stress." Marcus felt a rush of validation mixed with deeper fear. "So I'm not imagining this?" "No, sir, you're not. Dr. Johnson glanced at the door again. I'm going to document my concerns in your chart. I'm noting that I believe further cardiac testing is warranted, and that discharge at this time may not be in your best interest. Can you stop the discharge? Angela asked, hope rising in her voice. Dr. Johnson's expression turned pained. I'm only a resident. Dr. Brennan is the attending physician. He has the final say, but my documentation will be on record, and you have rights as a patient. You can refuse discharge. You can demand a second opinion. Won't you get in trouble for going against him? Marcus asked. Dr. Johnson paused, then nodded slowly. Maybe. Probably. But I didn't go to medical school to watch patients get inadequate care because of. She stopped herself, but they all knew what she was going to say. Because of racism. I'm documenting everything. If something happens to you, if your condition worsens, there will be a record that someone raised concerns. Angela stood up and hugged Dr. Johnson. Thank you. Thank you for seeing him. For really seeing him. Dr. Johnson hugged her back briefly, then pulled away. I have to go. He'll notice if I'm gone too long. Please advocate for yourselves. Don't let them push you out of here if you don't feel safe leaving. She slipped out of the room as quietly as she had entered. Angela immediately went back to her phone. She found the number for patient advocacy and called. While she talked to someone on the other end, Marcus closed his eyes. The pain in his chest was getting worse again, or maybe it had never really gotten better. Maybe he had just gotten used to it. 20 minutes later, a woman in business casual clothing entered the room. She introduced herself as Sharon Martinez, a patient advocate. Angela had requested her presence. Ms. Martinez had kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She pulled up a chair and asked them to explain what was happening. Angela did most of the talking. She described how long Marcus had waited in the emergency room while other patients were seen first. She explained Dr. Brennan's dismissive attitude, his questions about drug use, his refusal to listen to Dr. Johnson's concerns. She told Ms. Martinez about the plan to discharge Marcus despite his ongoing symptoms. Ms. Martinez took notes and nodded sympathetically. When Angela finished, Ms. Martinez turned to Marcus. Mr. Washington, do you feel well enough to be discharged? No, Marcus said firmly. I still have chest pain. I still can't breathe right. Something is wrong. I can feel it. Ms. Martinez nodded. You have the right to refuse discharge if you don't feel it's safe. I'll speak with the nursing staff and Dr. Brennan. I'll make sure your concerns are heard. Will it make a difference? Angela asked, her voice edged with skepticism. I'll do my best, Ms. Martinez said. But I want to be honest with you. Dr. Brennan is a senior physician here. He's highly respected. If he believes discharge is appropriate, it can be difficult to override that decision. However, your input matters. Your safety matters. I'll advocate for you. After Ms. Martinez left, Angela sat back down. She looked exhausted. We might need to call a lawyer. Marcus shook his head. Let's see what happens first. Maybe the patient advocate will help. Maybe Dr. Brennan will listen. But even as he said it, Marcus did not believe it. He had seen the look in Dr. Brennan's eyes. That doctor had already made up his mind. To him, Marcus was not a professional with a master's degree and a career helping young people. He was just another black man in a hospital bed, probably exaggerating, probably looking for drugs, probably not worth the time and resources. An hour passed, then another. Nurses came and went, checking vital signs, adjusting IV fluids. One nurse seemed uncomfortable when she told them that Dr. Brennan had written discharge orders for 2 o'clock that afternoon. She quickly added that they could refuse discharge if they wanted to, but she said it quietly, as if she was not supposed to tell them that. Just before noon, Dr. Brennan returned. This time he was alone, no medical students or residents following him. He walked into the room with the same neutral expression, carrying a tablet computer. Mr. Washington, I've spoken with the patient advocate, he said without preamble. I understand you have concerns about being discharged. Yes, Marcus said. I still have pain. I don't feel safe going home. Dr. Brennan sighed, a sound of barely concealed annoyance. Mr. Washington, Pain is subjective. I cannot keep every patient who reports pain. If we did that, the hospital would never have any available beds. Your objective medical findings do not support continued hospitalization. Dr. Johnson seems to think they do, Angela interjected. Dr. Brennan's jaw tightened. Dr. Johnson is a first-year resident. She's learning. Part of that learning process is understanding that not every abnormal finding represents a critical problem. She tends to be overcautious, which is common in new doctors. It's my job to provide perspective and experience. Your experience tells you my husband is fine? Angela asked, standing up now, her voice rising. Your experience tells you that a man with a family history of heart disease, with chest pain and trouble breathing, with abnormal test results, should just go home and take some Tylenol? Mrs. Washington, your emotional reaction is understandable, but not helpful. Dr. Brennan's voice remained infuriatingly calm. I've reviewed your husband's case thoroughly. I've considered all the factors. My professional opinion is that continued hospitalization is not warranted. What about a second opinion? Marcus asked. Can I see another cardiologist? Dr. Brennan's expression hardened. I am the attending cardiologist on duty today. If you don't trust my medical judgment, you're free to leave against medical advice and seek care elsewhere. However, I should warn you that leaving AMA may affect your insurance coverage. Angela felt her hands clench into fists. This man was cornering them, giving them impossible choices. Stay and be discharged anyway. Leave and risk insurance problems, or somehow force their way into getting more care from a doctor who clearly did not want to provide it. We're not leaving, Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. And we're not being discharged. Not until I see another doctor who actually listens to me. Dr. Brennan's face flushed slightly, the first real emotion he had shown. Mr. Washington, I've been a cardiologist for 3 decades. I've treated thousands of patients. I don't appreciate having my medical judgment questioned by someone with no medical training. Then maybe you should give me a reason to trust your judgment, Marcus shot back. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you decided I wasn't worth your time the moment you walked into this room. You asked me about drugs before you asked me about my symptoms. You dismissed Dr. Johnson when she tried to advocate for me. You've spent more time explaining why you don't need to help me than you've spent actually examining me. The room fell silent. Dr. Brennan stared at Marcus and Marcus stared back. Angela held her breath. Finally, Dr. Brennan spoke, his voice cold. I see. This is about race, isn't it? You think I'm not helping you because you're black. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Washington. I didn't say that, Marcus replied. You did. I treat all my patients equally, Dr. Brennan said, his voice rising now. I have devoted my life to helping people regardless of their color, their religion, or their background. The fact that you would suggest otherwise is offensive and insulting. The fact that my husband is in pain and you refuse to help him is what's offensive, Angela said, moving to stand beside Marcus's bed. We're not leaving. We're not being discharged. And we're going to keep fighting until someone in this hospital actually cares whether my husband lives or dies. Dr. Brennan took a step back, his face red now. He tapped something on his tablet, his fingers jabbing at the screen. Fine. Against my medical recommendation, I'll hold off on the discharge for now, but you're wasting a bed that another patient needs. When your condition inevitably does not worsen, I expect you to acknowledge that I was right. He turned and walked out, not bothering to close the door behind him. Angela sat down, her legs suddenly weak. Oh my God, what did we just do? Marcus reached for her hand. His own hand was shaking. We stood up for ourselves, that's what we did. But inside, Marcus felt a new kind of fear growing. They had made an enemy of the doctor who was supposed to save him. What if Dr. Brennan was so angry that he stopped checking on Marcus altogether? What if something really bad happened and no one came to help because they had been labeled as difficult patients? The pain in his chest throbbed harder, as if responding to his stress. Marcus tried to take deep breaths, but each breath felt inadequate. He looked at the monitor beside his bed. His heart rate was climbing. His blood pressure was up. Angela saw it too. Marcus, your numbers. I know, he whispered. I know. They had won this battle, forcing Dr. Brennan to delay the discharge. But Marcus could feel in his bones that the war was far from over. And somewhere in his chest, in the arteries that fed blood to his heart, something dangerous was happening. Something that no amount of standing up or fighting back could stop if the right medical care did not come soon. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Time was passing. And with each passing minute, Marcus Washington was moving closer to a crisis that would prove, once and for all, whether his instincts about his own body were right, or whether Dr. Brennan's professional opinion would be vindicated. Neither of them knew it yet, but the answer would come much sooner than anyone expected. The hours after Dr. Brennan left the room felt like an eternity. Marcus lay in his hospital bed, watching the monitors beside him track every heartbeat, every breath. The numbers kept fluctuating, never quite settling into a normal range. Angela sat in the chair, her phone in her hands, researching everything she could about heart attacks, cardiac testing, and patient rights. Around 1 o'clock, a nurse came in with lunch. Marcus barely touched it. His appetite had disappeared, replaced by a gnawing anxiety that sat in his stomach like a stone. The chest pain was still there, sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, but always present. It reminded him constantly that something inside him was wrong. "Do you want me to call anyone?" Angela asked, breaking the silence. "Maybe your sister, or Principal Davies at the school?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. Let's wait until we know what's really going on. No point in worrying everyone if it turns out to be nothing." But neither of them believed it was nothing. At 2 o'clock, the time when Marcus was originally supposed to be discharged, Dr. Brennan returned. His face was set in hard lines, his movements sharp and controlled. He was clearly unhappy about being challenged earlier. With him was a nurse Marcus had not seen before, a young white man with a clipboard. "Mr. Washington," Dr. Brennan said without greeting, "I've reconsidered your case. Since you've refused my discharge recommendation, I need to be clear about the plan going forward." Marcus and Angela exchanged glances. This did not sound good. Dr. Brennan pulled up the chair and sat down, but his posture was stiff, formal. "I've reviewed your tests again. The EKG shows some minor abnormalities, but they're not diagnostic of acute coronary syndrome. Your troponin levels were slightly elevated but have not risen significantly since admission, which suggests this is not an active heart attack. Your vital signs have remained stable." "But he's still in pain," Angela said. "Pain, as I've explained, is subjective." "Doctor," Brennan replied, his tone suggesting he was tired of repeating himself. "Many conditions cause chest pain. Costochondritis, which is inflammation of the chest wall, is extremely common and often mimics cardiac pain. Acid reflux can cause severe chest discomfort. Anxiety and panic attacks can produce identical symptoms to a heart attack." Marcus felt anger rising again. "I know what anxiety feels like. This isn't anxiety." Dr. Brennan continued as if Marcus had not spoken. "If you insist on staying, I'll keep you under observation for another 24 hours. However, I'm ordering that your pain medication be reduced to the minimum necessary. Over-medication can mask symptoms and can also lead to dependency issues." "Dependency issues," Angela repeated, her voice flat with disbelief. "You keep coming back to that. Why?" Dr. Brennan's eyes flickered with something, irritation perhaps, or maybe guilt. "It's standard medical practice to use the lowest effective dose of pain medication. I'm not singling your husband out. This is how I treat all patients." "Is it?" The question came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Dr. Keisha Johnson stood there, still in her scrubs from the morning, looking like she had not slept. Her eyes were tired but determined. "Dr. Johnson," Dr. Brennan said, his voice taking on a warning tone, "I thought you had moved on to your other assignments." "I'm on my lunch break," Dr. Johnson said, stepping into the room, "and I wanted to check on my patient." "Your patient is being managed by me now," Dr. Brennan said coldly. "With respect, sir, I was the admitting physician. I have a responsibility to follow through on his care." Dr. Johnson moved to stand beside Marcus's bed. She glanced at the monitors, and her frown deepened. His heart rate is elevated. Blood pressure is higher than when he was admitted. These are signs of continued cardiac stress, or signs of anxiety related to hospitalization, Dr. Brennan countered. Dr. Johnson, I appreciate your concern, but you're overstepping. You're a resident. You don't override attending physician decisions. I'm not trying to override you, sir. I'm trying to advocate for proper patient care. Dr. Johnson's voice was respectful but firm. She pulled out her phone and opened something on it. I've been reviewing the literature. A patient presenting with chest pain, family history of MI, and elevated biomarkers should receive further cardiac workup. Current guidelines recommend cardiac catheterization or at minimum a stress test to rule out significant coronary artery disease. Dr. Brennan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Are you seriously standing here lecturing me on guidelines? I wrote some of those guidelines, Dr. Johnson. I was practicing cardiology when you were in elementary school. That doesn't make you right in this case, Dr. Johnson said quietly. The room went silent. The young nurse with the clipboard looked like he wanted to disappear. Angela gripped Marcus's hand tighter. Marcus could hardly believe what he was witnessing, a resident directly challenging an attending physician, putting her career on the line. Dr. Brennan's face had gone from red to almost purple. You're done here, Dr. Johnson. Leave this room immediately. Sir, Now, that's an order. Dr. Brennan's voice was ice. And when you leave, go straight to the chief resident's office. We'll be having a conversation about your conduct. Dr. Johnson looked at Marcus and Angela, her eyes apologetic. Then she turned and walked out, her shoulders straight despite the trouble she knew was coming. After she left, Dr. Brennan turned back to Marcus and Angela. His professional mask had slipped, and the anger underneath was visible. That young woman is going to learn a hard lesson about respecting the chain of command. As for you, Mr. Washington, here's what's going to happen. You'll stay overnight as requested, but tomorrow morning you will be discharged, whether you like it or not, whether Dr. Johnson agrees or not. If you refuse, I'll have security escort you out. Am I clear? Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to fight back, but fear held his tongue. This man had complete power over his medical care. Crossing him further might actually make things worse. Angela, however, was not intimidated. We'll be calling our lawyer tonight, and we'll be filing formal complaints, multiple complaints, with the hospital administration, with the medical board, with anyone who will listen. Dr. Brennan smiled, but it was not a kind smile. You're welcome to do that, Mrs. Washington, but let me give you some advice. I've been at this hospital for 25 years. I'm the head of the cardiology department. I've saved countless lives. If you think some complaints from a patient who refused to follow medical advice are going to impact my career, you're mistaken. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual sick patients to attend to. He walked out, the nurse trailing behind him. The door clicked shut, leaving Marcus and Angela alone in the sudden silence. Angela started crying. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears running down her face. What do we do, Marcus? What do we do? Marcus felt his own eyes burning. This was worse than he could have imagined. They were trapped. Dr. Brennan had made it clear he was not going to provide the care Marcus needed, and he had the power to force them out of the hospital. Dr. Johnson had tried to help and was now facing punishment. The system was stacked against them. We get through tonight, Marcus said, though his voice shook. And tomorrow we find another hospital, another doctor, someone who will listen. But even as he said it, Marcus felt the pain in his chest intensify. It was spreading now, creeping up into his jaw, down his left arm. The pressure was building, like someone was slowly tightening a belt around his heart. He tried to take a deep breath, but his lungs would not cooperate. Marcus? Angela stood up, seeing the change in his face. Marcus, what's wrong? The pain, he managed to say. It's getting worse. Angela rushed to the door and called for a nurse. A different nurse came in, an older black woman who took one look at Marcus and immediately checked the monitors. She saw what Dr. Johnson had seen, what Dr. Brennan had chosen to ignore. The numbers were wrong. The heart rate too fast. The blood pressure too high. The oxygen saturation dropping. I'm going to get the doctor, the nurse said, her voice urgent. Dr. Brennan won't come, Angela said desperately. He doesn't believe my husband is really sick. The nurse looked at Angela, and in that moment an understanding passed between them. Then I'll find someone else, she said, and hurried out of the room. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to control his breathing, trying to manage the pain. It felt like his chest was being crushed, like an elephant was sitting on him. He had read that description in health class years ago. The elephant on your chest. He had thought it was an exaggeration. It was not. Stay with me, Angela whispered, gripping his hand so tight it hurt. Don't you dare leave me, Marcus Washington. We've been together 28 years. You don't get to leave me now. Marcus wanted to reassure her, wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but he could not speak. The pain was too intense. All he could do was squeeze her hand back, trying to communicate with that one gesture what his voice could not say. I'm here. I'm fighting. I love you. The nurse came back with Dr. Johnson. The young resident looked scared but determined. I don't care if I lose my residency, she said, moving to Marcus's bedside. I took an oath to do no harm. That includes not standing by when harm is being done. She checked Marcus quickly, her hands gentle but efficient. She looked at the monitors again, pulled up his chart on the computer. Her face went pale. His troponin has gone up, she said, significantly. And look at this new EKG. She printed out a fresh reading from the machine beside the bed. There. Those ST changes are unmistakable now. He's having an MI. He's having a heart attack right now. Angela's knees went weak. The nurse helped her to the chair. Dr. Johnson was already on the phone, calling for help, using words Marcus did not understand. Code this, stat that, prep the cath lab. The room exploded with activity. More nurses. Other doctors. Equipment being wheeled in. Someone put an oxygen mask over Marcus's face. Someone else inserted another IV line. The pain in his chest had become all-consuming, blocking out everything else. He could barely see Angela through the crowd of medical staff, but he could hear her crying, hear her saying his name over and over. Dr. Johnson was still there, right beside him, her hand on his shoulder. You were right, she said, her voice breaking. You were right about your body. You knew something was wrong. I'm sorry we didn't listen sooner. I'm so sorry. Through the chaos, through the pain, Marcus heard one more voice. Dr. Brennan had returned, drawn by the code alert. He stood in the doorway staring at the scene before him. His face had gone pale. He looked at the monitors, at the EKG printout in Dr. Johnson's hand, at Marcus fighting for his life in the hospital bed. For the first time since they had met him, Dr. Richard Brennan looked uncertain. He looked afraid, because he was watching the consequences of his own prejudice unfold in real time, and there was nothing he could do to take back the last 24 hours of dismissal and neglect. Marcus Washington had told them something was wrong. His body had been screaming warnings. Dr. Johnson had tried to listen, but Dr. Brennan had refused to hear, had refused to see past his own biases, and now a man's life hung in the balance. The next few minutes were a blur of organized chaos. Marcus felt himself being moved, rushed down hallways on his hospital bed while medical staff ran alongside him. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling streaked past like shooting stars. He could hear Angela's voice calling his name, could hear her footsteps trying to keep up, but then someone was telling her she could not go any further, that she had to wait. I love you, Angela shouted, her voice cracking. Marcus, I love you. He tried to call back to her, but the oxygen mask covered his mouth and the pain in his chest stole his breath. Then he was through double doors and into a cold room filled with machines and bright lights. The catheterization lab. He had seen these rooms on medical shows but never imagined he would be inside one, fighting for his life. Faces appeared above him, masked and gowned. Someone was explaining what was about to happen, but Marcus could barely focus on the words, cardiac catheterization, blockage, stent, emergency procedure. He nodded or tried to show he understood, to show he consented, to show he trusted them to save him. Mr. Washington, I'm Dr. Patricia Chen. I'm going to take care of you. The voice belonged to an Asian woman with kind eyes visible above her surgical mask. You're having a heart attack, but we caught it in time. I'm going to go into your artery and find the blockage. Then I'm going to open it up. You'll be awake for this, but we'll keep you comfortable. Do you understand? Marcus managed a small nod. Dr. Chen squeezed his shoulder. You're going to be okay? I promise I'll do everything I can." They gave him medication that made everything feel distant and soft around the edges. The pain was still there, but duller now, muted. He felt pressure in his groin where they made an incision, felt the strange sensation of something threading through his blood vessels, traveling up through his body toward his heart. Dr. Chen narrated as she worked, her voice calm and confident. Advancing the catheter. There's the blockage. 90% occlusion in the left anterior descending artery. The Widowmaker. He's lucky he's still with us. Marcus heard those words through the fog of medication. The Widowmaker. The kind of blockage that killed people. The kind his father had probably had. The heart attack that took him before he could get to the hospital. Marcus was luckier. He had made it here, and despite everything, despite Dr. Brennan's dismissal and delay, he had survived long enough to get to this room, to this doctor who believed him. Deploying the stent now, Dr. Chen said. Marcus felt a strange sensation in his chest. Not quite pain, but not quite comfort either. Good. Good flow restoration. That should do it. His numbers are already improving. The procedure took less than an hour, though it felt both longer and shorter to Marcus. Time had become elastic, stretching and compressing unpredictably. When it was over, they moved him to recovery. The pain in his chest was dramatically better, almost gone. He could breathe again. Really breathe deep and full, the air flowing easily into his lungs. Angela was allowed in once he was stable. She rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face, but these were different tears. Relief, joy, gratitude. She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his hands. "You're okay," she kept saying. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." Dr. Chen came in still wearing her surgical scrubs. She pulled up a chair beside the bed and took Marcus's hand. "Mr. Washington, I need to be very honest with you. That blockage in your artery was critical. 90% blocked. If we had waited much longer, if you had been sent home today like Dr. Brennan wanted, you almost certainly would have had a massive heart attack. You might not have survived." The words hung in the air. Angela gasped and covered her mouth. Marcus felt cold despite the warm blankets they had piled on him. "I've reviewed your entire chart," Dr. Chen continued. "I've read every note, every test result from the moment you arrived in the emergency department. I've also read Dr. Johnson's notes documenting her concerns, and I've read Dr. Brennan's notes dismissing those concerns." She paused, her expression troubled. "Mr. Washington, what happened to you over the past 24 hours was unacceptable. You presented with textbook symptoms of cardiac distress. You had risk factors. You had abnormal test results. Yet you were not only denied appropriate testing, you were scheduled for discharge while actively having a cardiac event. Why?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Dr. Chen looked him in the eyes. "I can't speak to Dr. Brennan's motivations, but I can tell you that what I've seen in your chart troubles me deeply. As a physician, I'm required to report any care that falls below acceptable standards. And this does. This falls far below." "He didn't believe me," Marcus said quietly. "From the moment he walked in, he had already decided I was making it up or exaggerating or looking for drugs. He saw me, a black man, and he made assumptions." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "I can't prove that bias played a role, but I also can't ignore the pattern I'm seeing. I'll be filing a formal report with the Medical Review Board. They'll investigate. I'm also going to recommend that they review Dr. Brennan's other cases, particularly his treatment of minority patients." Angela spoke up, her voice shaky but determined. Dr. Johnson tried to help. She tried to speak up for Marcus. Dr. Brennan threatened her, sent her away. "Is she in trouble?" "Dr. Johnson is a hero," Dr. Chen said firmly. "She put her career on the line to advocate for proper patient care. She documented everything meticulously. Without her notes, we might not have the evidence we need to support a full investigation. I've already spoken with the chief of medicine. Dr. Johnson is not in trouble. In fact, I'm recommending her for commendation." Over the next few hours, as Marcus recovered in the cardiac intensive care unit, more pieces of the story came together. The nurse who had rushed to get help, whose name was Gloria, came to check on Marcus. She told them she had been working at Metropolitan General for 30 years and had seen Dr. Brennan treat patients differently based on race before. She had never felt empowered to speak up. But after seeing what happened to Marcus, she had gone to hospital administration with her own report. Dr. Johnson visited late in the evening. She looked exhausted but relieved. She held Marcus's hand and apologized again for not fighting harder, for not pushing back more forcefully against Dr. Brennan. "You saved my life," Marcus told her. "You documented everything. You came back when you didn't have to. You stood up to him even when it could have cost you your career. You're the reason I'm still here." Dr. Johnson wiped tears from her eyes. "I almost didn't. I was scared. I kept thinking about my student loans, my residency, my future. But then I thought about what my grandmother would say. She marched in Selma. She faced fire hoses and police dogs to fight for civil rights. The least I could do was face one arrogant doctor to fight for my patient's life. She told them that other residents had come forward after hearing what happened. Stories of Dr. Brennan making racially insensitive comments. Stories of him dismissing patients of color more quickly than white patients. Stories of medical students who tried to speak up and were punished for it. It's like everyone knew but no one said anything," Dr. Johnson explained. "He's powerful. He's been here forever. He brings in a lot of money for the hospital. People were afraid to challenge him, but now?" Angela asked. "Now there's a formal investigation," Dr. Johnson said. "The medical board has to take this seriously. A patient nearly died because of inadequate care. There's documentation. There are witnesses. They can't sweep this under the rug." Late that night, after the visitors had left and Angela had finally agreed to go home and get some rest, Marcus lay in his hospital bed thinking. He was alive. The stent had worked. His heart was pumping blood properly again, but the experience had changed something fundamental inside him. He had always known racism existed. He had experienced it in small ways throughout his life. The suspicious looks in stores, the times he was passed over for opportunities, the low expectations some people had for him simply because of his skin color. But he had never imagined it could literally kill him. He had never thought that walking into a hospital, a place of healing, could become life-threatening because of the color of his skin. How many other people had experienced something similar? How many had not been as lucky as him? How many had gone home only to die because their symptoms were dismissed? Their pain was not believed, their lives were not valued. The next morning, Dr. Chen came by during her rounds. She smiled when she saw Marcus sitting up in bed eating breakfast. "You look much better. How do you feel?" "Physically? Better than I've felt in days." "Emotionally?" Marcus shrugged. "I'm processing," Dr. Chen nodded. She pulled up a chair. "I want you to know that Dr. Brennan has been suspended pending the investigation. He's not seeing patients right now. The hospital administration is taking this very seriously." "Will he lose his job?" Marcus asked. "That depends on what the investigation finds, but even if he doesn't lose his job, his actions will be on his permanent record, and the hospital is implementing new protocols because of what happened to you. Mandatory bias training for all staff, a new system for patients to request second opinions without repercussions, better oversight of attending physicians." Marcus appreciated that changes were being made, but he could not help feeling bitter. "It shouldn't have taken me almost dying for people to pay attention." "You're right," Dr. Chen said quietly. "It shouldn't have. But sometimes that's what it takes to force a system to change. Your story, your willingness to speak up, your refusal to be dismissed, it's going to help other patients. It already is." After Dr. Chen left, Marcus picked up his phone. He had dozens of messages from friends, family, colleagues at school. Word had gotten out about what happened. His sister wanted to drive up from Atlanta. The principal had called 3 times. His students had made him a giant get well card. But there was one message that stood out. It was from a reporter at the local newspaper. She had heard about his case from someone at the hospital, someone who felt the story needed to be told publicly. She wanted to interview Marcus, to share what happened to him, to shine a light on racial bias in medical care. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to forget this ever happened, to recover quietly and go back to his normal life. But another part of him, the part that taught history and civil rights to teenagers every day, knew that staying silent would be a betrayal, not just of himself but of everyone else who might face the same dismissal, the same danger. He typed out a reply. Yes, he would talk to the reporter. Yes, he would tell his story. Because Marcus Washington had learned something important in that hospital bed, watching Dr. Brennan dismiss his pain and Dr. Johnson risk everything to save him. Silence protects the system. Truth challenges it, and sometimes surviving is not enough. Sometimes you have to speak. 3 weeks after his emergency heart surgery, Marcus Washington sat across from journalist Maria Santos in the small conference room at Metropolitan General Hospital. His chest still ached sometimes, a reminder of the stent that now kept his artery open. But the pain was nothing compared to what he had felt that terrible day. Angela sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm, ready to support him through this difficult conversation. Maria's recorder sat on the table between them, a tiny red light blinking. "Mr. Washington, thank you for agreeing to share your story. I know this can't be easy." Marcus took a deep breath. "It's not easy, but it's necessary. If telling what happened to me can help even one person, then it's worth it." He told her everything. The long wait in the emergency room while others were seen first. Dr. Brennan's immediate assumptions about drug use. The dismissal of his symptoms as anxiety. The plan to discharge him while he was actively having a heart attack. Dr. Johnson's brave attempts to intervene. The near-fatal consequences of bias and neglect. Maria took notes and asked careful questions. "How do you feel knowing that Dr. Brennan's prejudice almost cost you your life?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Angry, scared, sad, but mostly determined. Determined that this can't keep happening. Determined that the medical system has to do better. "What would you say to Dr. Brennan if you could speak to him now?" Marcus looked at Angela, then back at Maria. "I'd ask him why. Why did he see me as a problem instead of a patient? Why did he ignore the evidence right in front of him? Why was he so certain that I was lying about my pain? And I'd tell him that his actions have consequences. Real consequences. For me, for my family. For every patient of color who might not speak up because they're afraid of not being believed." The article ran in the Sunday paper with the headline, "Teacher nearly dies after doctor dismisses heart attack symptoms. Family alleges racial bias." It included Marcus's photo, quotes from hospital administration, and carefully worded statements about the ongoing investigation. Maria had done her homework, including statistics about racial disparities in cardiac care, about how Black patients are systematically undertreated for pain, about how bias in medicine costs lives. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Marcus's story was shared thousands of times on social media. Other patients came forward with similar experiences at Metropolitan General and other hospitals. The local television news picked up the story. By Monday morning, reporters were camped outside the hospital demanding answers. The hospital's chief of medicine, Dr. Robert Chang, held a press conference. He stood at a podium looking uncomfortable under the bright lights and dozens of cameras. "We take these allegations extremely seriously. An internal investigation is underway. We are committed to providing equitable, high-quality care to all patients regardless of race, ethnicity, or background." A reporter shouted a question. "Is Dr. Brennan still employed here?" Dr. Chang's jaw tightened. "Dr. Brennan is currently on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. I cannot comment further on personnel matters." Behind the scenes, the investigation was uncovering a disturbing pattern. The Medical Review Board examined 5 years of Dr. Brennan's patient records. They found that Black and Hispanic patients under his care were significantly more likely to be discharged quickly, less likely to receive advanced cardiac testing, and more likely to have their pain medication reduced or denied. The disparities were statistically significant and could not be explained away as coincidence. Other medical staff came forward, some anonymously, some with their names attached. A former nurse described how Dr. Brennan once referred to a Black patient as drug-seeking despite no evidence to support the claim. A medical student reported that Dr. Brennan had made racially insensitive jokes during rounds. 2 other residents confirmed that Dr. Johnson was not the first to be punished for questioning his judgment. Dr. Keisha Johnson became the face of medical courage. She gave interviews about the pressure young doctors face to stay silent, about the culture of hierarchy in medicine that protects bad physicians. She spoke eloquently about the need for systemic change, not just individual accountability. "This isn't just about one doctor," she told a news reporter. "This is about a system that allows bias to flourish, that punishes people who speak up, that values reputation and money over patient safety. We have to do better. We have to be better." Marcus and Angela decided to take legal action. They hired an attorney, a sharp woman named Jessica Lynn, who specialized in medical malpractice and civil rights cases. She reviewed Marcus's medical records, interviewed witnesses, and built a case not just against Dr. Brennan but against the hospital for allowing his behavior to continue unchecked for years. This is about accountability, Jessica explained during their first strategy meeting. Dr. Brennan made choices that nearly killed you, but the hospital administrators knew he had problems and did nothing. That's institutional failure. The lawsuit sought damages for medical malpractice, emotional distress, and violation of civil rights. But more than the money, Marcus and Angela wanted acknowledgement. They wanted the hospital to admit what had happened. They wanted guarantees that real changes would be made. As weeks turned into months, those changes began to take shape. Metropolitan General implemented a comprehensive anti-bias training program, mandatory for all medical staff. They created a new patient advocacy system where anyone could request a second opinion without fear of retaliation. They formed a diversity committee to review policies and outcomes for racial disparities. Dr. Brennan was given a choice by the medical board: face a formal hearing that could result in the loss of his medical license, or retire immediately and agree to never practice medicine again. He chose retirement. His statement, released through his lawyer, claimed he had devoted his life to helping patients and denied any racial bias. But he did not return to Metropolitan General. His office was cleaned out, his nameplate removed from the door. Some people defended him. Colleagues who had worked with him for decades insisted he was a good doctor, who had simply made an error in judgment. They pointed to the hundreds of patients he had successfully treated over his career. They suggested the accusations of racism were overblown. But Marcus knew better. He had seen the look in Dr. Brennan's eyes. He had heard the tone of his voice. He had felt the dismissal, the assumption, the devaluation of his humanity. You could not unsee that once you had experienced it. 6 months after his heart attack, Marcus returned to teaching. His students welcomed him back with cheers and homemade banners. The principal gave a speech about resilience and courage. Marcus looked out at the sea of young faces, black and brown and white and Asian, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. He began incorporating his experience into his history lessons. When they studied the civil rights movement, he talked about how racism does not just exist in the past, but continues in different forms today. When they learned about Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat, he talked about Dr. Johnson refusing to stay silent. When they discussed Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches about justice, he explained that sometimes justice requires making people uncomfortable, requires challenging systems of power. His students listened with wide eyes. Some shared their own stories of being dismissed or discriminated against. Others admitted they had never thought about racial bias in healthcare before. All of them seemed to understand that the fight for equality was not over, that it happened in hospitals and schools and courtrooms every single day. Angela became involved in patient advocacy work. She joined a nonprofit organization that helped people navigate the medical system, that taught them how to speak up for themselves and their loved ones. She spoke at community centers and churches, sharing Marcus's story and empowering others to demand better care. "Don't let anyone tell you your pain isn't real," she would say. "Don't let anyone make you doubt what your body is telling you. You are the expert on your own experience, and if a doctor won't listen, find one who will." Dr. Keisha Johnson completed her residency with honors. She received multiple awards for patient advocacy and courage in medicine. She was offered prestigious fellowship positions at several hospitals, but chose to stay at Metropolitan General, feeling a responsibility to continue the work of reform from within the system. She and Marcus stayed in touch, meeting for coffee every few months. They had formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by the experience that had changed both their lives. Dr. Johnson told Marcus about the changes she was seeing in the hospital culture, about how younger doctors were being trained differently, about how his story had become a case study in their ethics classes. "You made a difference," she told him during one of their meetings. "Real, lasting change. Medical students now learn about implicit bias using your case. Hospitals across the country are reviewing their protocols because of what happened to you." Marcus smiled, but it was bittersweet. "I wish it hadn't taken me almost dying to wake people up." "I know," Dr. Johnson said softly. "But that's how change happens sometimes. Someone has to be brave enough to say this isn't right. Someone has to refuse to be silenced. You did that. The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court. Metropolitan General agreed to a significant financial payment, but more importantly, they agreed to continued monitoring of racial disparities in care, to funding for bias training, and to the creation of an independent review board to investigate patient complaints. They issued a public apology to Marcus and his family, acknowledging that he had received inadequate care and that systemic failures had contributed to his near-death experience. It was not perfect. No amount of money or apologies could give Marcus back the time he spent in fear, could erase the trauma Angela experienced watching her husband nearly die, could undo the damage to their trust in the medical system. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was a start. Marcus still had to take heart medication every day, a reminder of his blocked artery and the emergency surgery that saved his life. Every time he swallowed those pills, he thought about how close he had come to never seeing another sunrise, never teaching another class, never holding his wife's hand again. But he also thought about the students he was still able to teach, the lives he could still influence. He thought about Dr. Johnson's courage and Nurse Gloria's honesty. He thought about Dr. Chen's skill and compassion. He thought about all the patients who might receive better care now because he had spoken up. 1 year after his heart attack, Marcus was invited to speak at a medical conference about patient perspectives on bias in healthcare. He stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of doctors and nurses and medical students, and felt nervous but determined. "I'm not here to tell you that all doctors are bad," he began. "The doctor who saved my life was exceptional. The resident who advocated for me put her career on the line. But I am here to tell you that bias can kill. It almost killed me." He told his story once more, his voice steady and clear. He talked about the importance of listening to patients, of checking your assumptions at the door, of recognizing that your power as a physician comes with tremendous responsibility. "When you see a patient, really see them," he said. "See their humanity. See their fear. See their pain. Don't let your preconceptions about who they are or where they come from cloud your medical judgment, because every life matters. Every patient deserves your best care. And sometimes, believing a patient when they tell you something is wrong is the difference between life and death." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Many had tears in their eyes. Several doctors approached him afterward to thank him, to apologize on behalf of their profession, to promise they would do better. As Marcus and Angela drove home that evening, Angela reached over and squeezed his hand. "Your father would be proud of you," she said. Marcus thought about his father, dead at 55 from a heart attack. He thought about how different his father's outcome had been, how he never made it to the hospital in time. Marcus had been luckier. He had survived, and he had chosen to use that survival to fight for change. "I hope so," Marcus said. "I hope he knows that I'm trying to make things better. For me, for our community, for everyone who comes after us." The sun was setting as they pulled into their driveway, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus got out of the car and stood for a moment, breathing in the cool evening air, feeling his heart beat steadily in his chest. He was alive. He was healing, and he was fighting, not with fists or weapons, but with words and truth and stubborn refusal to accept injustice. It was not the fight he had chosen, but it was the fight he had been given, and Marcus Washington was determined to win it. One story at a time, one changed mind at a time, one saved life at a time. Because that was what teachers did. They opened eyes. They challenged thinking. They created change, and that was what survivors did. They took their pain and transformed it into purpose. They took their trauma and turned it into testimony. They took their near-death experience and refused to let it be in vain. Marcus Washington had walked into a hospital seeking help and nearly died because of prejudice. But he had walked out determined to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate. And in the months and years that followed, his determination created ripples of change that spread far beyond one hospital, one doctor, one patient. It proved that one voice speaking truth to power could challenge an entire system. It proved that courage comes in many forms. And it proved that sometimes the people who survive the worst experiences become the strongest advocates for change. Marcus Washington was more than a survivor. He was a catalyst, and his story would continue to echo in hospitals and medical schools and community meetings for years to come. A reminder that every patient deserves to be seen, heard, believed, and treated with dignity, because in the end, that is what medicine is supposed to be about. Not just treating diseases, but honoring the humanity of every person who walks through the door, seeking help. And when that basic principle is forgotten, when bias is allowed to flourish, when voices are silenced and concerns are dismissed, everyone loses. But when people like Marcus stand up and speak out, when doctors like Keisha Johnson put integrity over career advancement, when systems are forced to confront their failures and commit to doing better, that is when real healing begins, not just for individual patients but for the entire broken system. And that, Marcus often thought as he stood before his students teaching about civil rights and justice, is how progress happens. One brave act at a time, one truth spoken at a time, one life saved at a time.